With cyber attacks on the rise, protecting your data security is more important than ever. So why is Congress considering a bill that puts your credit card data at greater risk of being hacked and exposed to foreign networks? The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill shifts billions in consumer spending to less secure payment networks, all so that corporate megastores can make bigger profits. Don't let Durbin-Marshall steal your data. Visit electronicpaymentscoalition.org and tell your senators to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.
In the 5th annual Comfortably Smug Liberal Hack Tournament, Hack Madness begins March 22nd.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show.
Keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs.
It's time for our main event.
Welcome back to the Ruthless Variety Program, fellas. Good to see you here on Thursday. A big program ahead of us.
Yeah, and good to see. The legend continues. Hack Madness, y'all saw that promo, y'all got hyped. Hack Madness returns Friday.
Oh, God, it's the greatest time of the year, isn't it?
It really is. You know, it's like you say, the journos will finally be held accountable.
The one day of the year, and then we have 3 weeks to vote on how bad they actually are.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
So a bit of housekeeping here. So on Friday, we will release the selection show, which is, I mean, it's
some
something.
of our best stuff, if I'm being frank.
It's good, and I gotta tip the cap to Wolf and Spaghettis on it, because I mean the post production on it to really make it snazzy has been something. I feel like we're sort of becoming a little bit of an ESPN around here.
Well, it's a real program, a little program that could.
Also, I want to give a shout out. Everyone's seeing Ashbrook. If you're on the YouTube typing away, he's warning all his journo buddies that we're coming for them. So don't mind him. But again, that's a reason to subscribe to the YouTube. You get to see Ashbrook being like, guys, they're coming for you. My journo buddies.
Excuse me, Ben.Smith.
Yeah.
and the best part about Hack Madness for you, dear listener, is you get to join us in this fun. If you go to hackmadness.org on Friday when the bracket is released, you can fill out your bracket and you can follow along. You can compete with other minions for your predictions, and then of course on Comfortably Smug's Twitter you can vote for your favorite hacks.
That's right. I'm going to pin to the top whatever is the latest round everyone should vote on, so keep your eyes peeled. It begins Friday.
It begins, and honestly, it's one of the best things that we do.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the most fun time of the year.
I mean, it's a public service.
and it's a variety.
And the squealing that you get.
Yeah.
That's the best part. It's
It
because
really
the journos
is.
get mad.
Oh, they hate it. They hate it so much. But, you know, this is a real professional deal. I mean, I think back on when we started putting that thing together, and we were just kind of slapping
grown up.
stuff together. And then I just saw a little preview of what we're intending to do this time around.
We've come a long way.
Whew.
Yeah.
A long way. Well, you know how Wolf likes the meat up front.
Yeah, loves the meat.
He
right in
loves
front.
the meat right up front.
Mm-hmm.
And so, complying with his meat orders, I'll say, first off, Biden having a very similar week to all the weeks he's previously had, a very rough one as his approval rating hovers into the 30s. He's getting beat.
30s.
Getting beat in every swing state that he would need to win. And so you've seen the press. We talked a little bit about this on Tuesday. And the press is like now fully armed in general election mode. And in that vein, Wolf flagged a story that I thought was perfect in how it sort of glosses all of this together, which is entitled Republicans Fixate on Messy Afghanistan Withdrawal.
How
Why
dare
are
we?
they fixated on, service members were murdered? Stop fixating on that.
Oh, it's fixed.
It's more important that Joe Biden wanted to have his spiking the football on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Stop fixating on service members who were murdered. Like, come on, man.
I've always, knowing how much fun we make of them and knowing that they hate listen to the program, I still find it amazing. It's almost, they have to be gaslighting when they put pouncing and seizing.
Yeah.
And they still do it with great regularity.
Yeah.
Fixating is a new part of that genre.
I really think that it's like a sport for them because they are all Democrats and they all know this drives us nuts. And so they're like, what's the next synonym I can choose?
Yeah.
Fixating.
And this is like
they're coming up with other ways to do it.
It's like, especially egregious because it's not like Republicans pounds on tax bill or whatever. Like, Americans were killed here. And they are so dedicated, the journos are so dedicated to protecting Joe Biden that they're like, well, let's say that Republicans are the bad guys here.
Yeah, they're fixating, and we can't figure out why, but they're fixating on it. It reminds me a little bit, you're right, Ashbrook, it reminds me a little bit of when I first started in GOP comms world, where we would say every time we referred to a Democrat, no matter the tense, it was always Democrat, not Democratic, and they would go insane.
Yeah,
every time you
for
said
whatever
it,
reason, they've lost their mind.
they would go insane, and so you just kept doing it over and over. And so maybe that's what's going on with the pouncing and the seizing, and now they're fixating.
Right.
But this particular one is of massive concern. That headline that I read you was from Politico. Not terribly surprised by that. If we can we play clip 1 just to get us started here?
In jail, dead, some of them?
I think some were killed. Afghans. I don't know about the Americans. I don't think the Americans were, but I think some of the Afghans were tracked down that worked with us, and I think some of them were killed, and I'm pretty certain some of them in pretty brutal ways. Some were managed to escape through various means. Others have just laid low and keeping their heads down.
So that is General Mark Milley testifying before the House of Representatives, talking about how some of the people in Afghanistan were tracked down and murdered
For helping the U.S.
For helping the U.S., which was amongst the most predictable things on the face of the planet. It's a thing that we were talking about. Now that we have some history books on this show, we go back a little while. We were talking about with Afghanistan and withdrawal dates and all that thing is like what you needed to be aware that retribution was coming, and you needed to do it in a way that protected your allies, got people out of there, did whatever. They did none of it. And we've been frustrated, frankly, despite the best efforts of a lot of House Republicans of holding these guys accountable for this, because it's like gone and forgotten from mainstream news, all of which were preventable. 13 Marines lost their lives as a result of a policy decision that was contrived to try to have President Biden celebrate the 20th anniversary of 9/11 by withdrawing our troops. It was a political date, not a date to try to take care of allies in the region.
Yeah, I think the thing that upsets me the most about this, hearing about our allies on the ground, you know, Afghan translators and people like that who were killed in the most brutal ways possible by the Taliban after we left, is it undermines what is the most important currency in foreign policy, and that is trust.
That's right.
That the United States of America as a country is known as a good ally because they say what they're going to do and then they do what they're going to say. And when you once you lose that trust with your allies, it's not an Afghan problem. It becomes a problem everywhere around the globe, where your allies don't know that they can trust you're going to deliver on what you're saying you can promise.
Well, it quite obviously contributed to Putin's decision to go into Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, it was shortly thereafter that all of a sudden that is on the radar. You had China vis-a-vis Taiwan watching the Ukraine thing closely. I mean, that your point is right. If foreign policy has one principle, it's the principle that what you say you have to deliver upon in order for people to actually ally with you rather than the enemy. Everybody's got to figure out what tomorrow looks like. And if you're no longer there.
And the most important thing, and this is sort of lost in all of this, and I say this just for our listeners' sake, because foreign policy is obviously a difficult thing sometimes, but like that trust actually keeps us safe, because it means when the United States says, you better not do that, or this is going to happen, that ends up keeping us out of a lot of conflict and trouble in the world. And once you lose that, the bad actors, the Russias of the world, think they have a free hand to do whatever they want. And that has a cascading effect for our allies and our troops around the globe.
And you don't need to like read ancient history for this. Look at the 90s and look at 9/11.
Yeah, everything that led up to it.
Everything that led up to it. I mean, that's basically what it's going on. But I'm happy that House Republicans are still on this. They, all those guys came in here to do interviews when they were running for Congress. And they said that this is a principal reason, many veterans, this is the principal reason why they are running. Mm-hmm. It's nice to see this, right? I mean, they haven't forgotten this. They're holding these people accountable. So anyway, we'll look for more out of that, despite the fact that the press wants to make it seem. Here's one piece of this story that I just found absolutely unbelievable. It's unclear just how much of a liability the war in Afghanistan will prove for Biden heading into a likely presidential matchup with Donald Trump, who initiated the withdrawal process by signing a deal with the Taliban. Oh, okay. So now we're not. This is like better than revising history, right? This is revising what actually happened and suggesting, there's muddy water there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's unclear whether this is going to impact Biden because it's Trump's fault.
Yep. Yeah.
That's what they're writing.
Well, it also takes...
Well, as if his hands were bound. Like Joe Biden didn't pick the 20th anniversary of 9/11 as a date that he wanted to get out.
And it has a way of diminishing what was a clear and obvious tragedy, removing it from the battlefield and making it a political issue. It's 6 of one, half dozen the other.
You're also diluting. If you're writing that, you're diluting yourself into thinking that it actually is going to change somebody's point of view on what happened in Afghanistan.
I'm scared.
Like it's simply
I'm
you
scared
were right.
I'm scared it will. I mean, that's the thing these people operate for one simple purpose. Now, this is not the press that used to be. We will hold the powerful accountable. And we will bring comfort to the afflicted. This is not that press anymore. This is they're talking about, well, Trump's to blame when President Biden was overseeing this withdrawal.
They're doing this with so many things in our society, not the least of which is school closings is associated with COVID. You've seen what the New York Times is doing. Yeah. I don't know. Have you seen this?
They're trying to rewrite
cover
history.
up. Yeah, exactly. So I think that the patience that people have for this sort of like revisionist history is very, very short at the moment. And I just don't think that I really don't think somebody's going to open that story and read it and think, well, you know what? The journalists are probably right in this case.
They're not going to believe it because they had to live through it. Like their kids had to go in a mask to school. We saw the video of the the planes leaving Afghanistan with people hanging from the landing gear.
Those are real things.
It's a real thing. We saw it. Yeah. So, I mean, they're going to try to gaslight. I 100% agree, Smug. I just don't think it's actually going to work.
I hope not.
Well,
that's all I'm saying.
Well, no, I think that's a good point.
Americans for Prosperity has done it again. You're going to love this. Know how Biden's been running around the country bragging about Bidenomics? And the media's doing stories on how the president has embraced the term? Well, guess what? Americans for Prosperity just bought the Bidenomics.com domain name. I can't believe the White House didn't get this first. This would be like Pepsi buying Coca-Cola.com. It's hilarious. Bidenomics.com sets the record straight on the failures of Joe Biden's economy, his horrible record on cost of living, wages, debt, deficits, energy, and more. I've been to the site. I can tell you, it's not what Joe Biden wants Americans to see. AFP takes Biden's own words and compares them to the reality of everyday Americans. It's packed with facts and stories that prove Bidenomics is a costly failure. Americans for Prosperity deserves a lot of credit for this coup. Visit Bidenomics.com soon, the website Joe Biden doesn't want you to see.
Transitioning to our second story is a perfect segue here because the one thing, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, is that growing up in the era that many of us grew up in, there was a lot of bad policy, good policy, whatever, but you always had faith that Americans, if they were traveling abroad, something bad happened, or if your military was taken prisoner, or that America was coming with its full force to get you out. Right? It was the promise that you made to an American for being an American, that your government was coming for you. Afghanistan was a notable departure from that.
Yep.
Right? Also, trading terrorists for WNBA players and leaving school teachers in Russia is a perfect example of that. Well, now you've got this situation in Haiti, which if you haven't been following it, part of it is just rampant gang violence, political instability,
cannibalism,
full humanitarian crisis going on there. And so there's been, understandably, a real concern about getting Americans out of there before they get killed, right? And on that score, the Biden administration seems completely indifferent to all of this.
Look, we have a plan. It's worked in the past for us. We're not going to help anyone who's stranded.
We're going to
If you're an
ignore
American
it.
who's stranded, good luck.
We're hoping that the next Trump trial will take your attention over me neglecting my responsibility as commander-in-chief of this nation. That's basically it.
That's our
in
whole
a
game
nutshell,
plan.
right? So listen, here's clip 2.
So no plans to evacuate as of now. Do you anticipate there may be some support for evacuation for those few hundred or however many there are?
We will always provide information to American citizens that reach out to us when we can do so. For example, if there's information about the operations at the airport that becomes available, we'll make that known to Americans who reach out to us. But we are not actively planning for any evacuation, no.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we'll send them a link to kayak.com and they can try to find a flight.
He literally said, we'll send him a link.
Yeah.
He said, well, there's a website.
Well,
Yeah.
you guys know the digital infrastructure in Haiti is terrific.
And I mean, like, you're
I mean,
hearing,
think about this.
you're an American citizen overseas. You're hearing gunfire outside.
Your
And
government's
you're
not
like,
coming.
No. You were told, listen, bro, try filling out a form. We'll try to look at it between the hours of 9 to 5.
What are you doing? What my whole question about this, and I understand how, we're talking about a finite number of people, and we're talking about, a problem we didn't create, and people chose to travel to Haiti, probably unwisely. But that's not the promise you get in this country. At least it didn't used to be.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with these guys is that they don't feel like it's their job to uphold a promise to an American to get you out of harm's way when you're in a foreign country. And that is a hell of a thing that we haven't really talked about enough in this country. Like, that's a big fucking deal. The idea that for the first time as an American, you could find yourself as a victim of a foreign government somewhere and have no real faith or confidence that your government is going to do a damn thing about it.
I mean, the General Barbecue, whatever his name is in Haiti, is able to have more sway over the fate of Americans than the President of the United States.
Yeah.
It's really something. So, I mean, I just noticed before we went on air, there's a congressman from Florida, Corey Mills.
Yep.
Who is, and I saw a picture of him. He looked like a badass hanging out the side of a helicopter, rescuing people himself. I mean, I think they have like 23 or something that he's gotten out of there. Like he and this group that he's put together has gotten out of there because the government won't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, hats off to him.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent understanding of your role.
Yeah, but it's but like, isn't it incredible that we need to form the A team or like the Avengers
Seriously.
to go save Americans because our president and this administration won't do shit?
But doesn't it remind you of those special forces guys who were off the clock at
Yeah.
the Pentagon?
Yeah.
Who fought in the global war on terror in 07, 08 and had translators and had relationships with the families that were in Afghanistan and knew they were in great danger and put themselves together as like SEAL-like squads to go out and try to help?
It was like Pineapple Express in Afghanistan because these were Americans who took it upon themselves and the commitment that they have to their countrymen to
'Cause they
do
haven't
what
forgotten.
what the Biden administration won't.
And we've heard so many of these stories from people over the last, couple of months and years, and it's I hope we're able to tell more of those stories here on the show because I know there's folks who've reached out to try to tell some of those stories, and I would love to because I think it's just fascinating stuff, and really heroic stuff.
And it's where you can set politics aside and look at the real human impact.
Yeah.
Of all this stuff. Anyway, so that's what's going on. The meat up front, as Wolf always loves. Coming up on Ruthless, we talked a little bit about Hack Madness. I can't stop talking about Hack Madness, but again, we're going to get that out to you Friday. Voting starts, I think, almost immediately. Yeah. It'll be at Comfortably Smug on Twitter.
Yep.
You've got all of that. We've got King of the Hill today.
Yes.
Where you're defending your title, Smug.
That's right.
And I am now in jurisprudence. I'm not a judge. I'm the bailiff, but I intend to run a strict court here.
I say you'd be the judge.
Well, I could be.
Well,
I could be.
You could be the judge, but I'm playing, and I'm very, very excited to play.
I'll tell you what. If it's agreeable with you, Duncan, I say we deputize Holmes. He's the judge this week.
Well, I'm willing to serve. I'm willing to serve. We're going to run through the Senate map a little bit because there's a big development in Ohio on Tuesday with a very contentious Senate primary that one of the guys that you listen to on the show, Bernie, is through. And Bernie Moreno will be the Senate Republican candidate in a must-win state, taking on long-time product of Washington, D.C., Sherrod Brown, Democrat who unbelievably still holds the seat in Ohio. But we got to win that one, and then that, and a little rest of the map just to get you updated on that. We got some PNAS news, it looks like.
The folks always love that.
Yeah.
Everybody loves big PNAS.
That's the proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And then we've got an incredible guest today. This is, guys, one of my favorites, and I don't know if he really knows this. We didn't talk about it in the interview, but he is one of my mentors in terms of on-air stuff because I think he's just such a professional. He's so good. He's such a gentleman. Brit Hume of Fox News joins us today.
Excellent.
So we got a lot going on, and we'll get to it right after this.
Ruthless is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, we're all looking for ways to improve, especially with limited time in this chaotic world. Work demands, kids' activities, it all adds up. It helps to have someone to talk to about your goals. Maybe you're looking to manage stress or figure out what you can do better to focus at work. Talking through it gives you clarity and can help keep you focused on what really matters. If you're looking to be the best version of yourself, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp offers entirely online therapy designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your busy schedule. You simply fill out a brief questionnaire and you're matched to a licensed therapist. Once you're matched to a therapist, they will reach out and ask you a few questions to get to know you better. You can book a live session right in app. From there, you can talk to your therapist by live chat, phone, or video call. It's just that easy. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/ruthless today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/ruthless.
All right, so the Senate map, fellas. This is of great importance for a variety of reasons. Always like to have majorities in the House and Senate just for legislating and everything else, but they're in the personnel business too. So if you get a Trump presidency here, it's vitally important that there's a Senate Republican majority because there's no way to really get cabinet officials confirmed, or at least a guarantee of confirmation when you have a Democratic majority there. And I think this is an area where if you're looking through the looking glass on how this might play out in January and February of 2025, of critical importance.
Huge.
Right? Because we know that Democrats basically lay in train tracks to try to stop anything and everything that's Trump, regardless of whether it makes sense or not. And I think their best opportunity to do that would be to try to either block nominees or block judicial nominees or try to get concessions in the course of confirmation hearings that nobody wants. And that's the power that they have unless there's a Senate Republican majority, in which case, go fuck yourself.
Well, also the inverse, and I think that's important as well.
The inverse is important as well.
Let's talk about that for a second here is, if you end up in a situation where, God forbid, Joe Biden's reelected with a Democratic Senate majority, they've already told us what they want to do. They basically kicked Kyrsten Sinema out of their party because she wouldn't eliminate the filibuster.
She's not left enough.
They want to make D.C. the most crime-ridden place on the planet.
Yeah.
An ungovernable, ridiculous place.
And the only other
state.
The only other guy in their party who wouldn't go along with their plan as well, Joe Manchin, is going to be retiring, right? So if they somehow end up with a Senate majority and Joe Biden as president, they will eliminate the filibuster. They will do every radical left-wing thing.
Pack the court.
Packing the court. And those stakes as well, Smug. I'm so glad you mentioned it. But there are legislative things that are obviously a very big deal. But the future of the United States Supreme Court is another thing that we cannot overlook.
Right.
It took 40 years to get to this place, and the left can undo it very, very, very quickly if they so choose.
Well, the only reason that Merrick Garland is not on the Supreme Court and it's Neil Gorsuch instead is because there was a Democratic president and a Republican Senate.
Yeah. That's
right. To your point. So anyway, Picking up with the Ohio news, with Bernie Moreno winning a very contentious primary, but winning it in style. I mean, he put big numbers up, and it looks to me like he's going into a general election with a heck of a lot of momentum. Of course, he was the candidate that was endorsed by President Trump, endorsed by J.D. Vance, the other senator there. Had a lot of, America First support, but it seems like it's bled well beyond that. I mean, if you're picking up 50, let's go to graphic number 1 if we could. I mean, that's a margin. There was a bunch of polls that were coming out in the final days before the election that showed Dolan ahead. Mm-hmm. And, Trump did a rally the weekend before. I mean, it really consolidated. Of course, Trump is still on the ballot there, technically, despite the fact that there's no real race. And it basically turned out a hell of a lot of people for Bernie Moreno.
And turned out everywhere, every single county.
Yeah.
And Ohio is a diverse state. I mean, you got everything from the Cincinnati suburbs, to, the area that is next to the Pennsylvania border.
Yeah.
I mean, very different types of communities.
People forget you got Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, and then you got a bunch of other stuff out there. There's rural area. You've got parts of Appalachia. I mean, it's an interesting state. It's one of the reasons why Sherrod Brown's had some success is because he's amongst the most populist Democrats out there, although his brand of populism is hard left.
Right.
Yep. I mean, hard left, and almost indistinguishable from Bernie Sanders in a lot of ways. But it is something that Bernie Moreno takes an awful lot of that off the table.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's really my point is like the fact that he has that support across all of those Republican constituencies tells me he's a strong general election candidate in a presidential election year in a state that's trended rightward. I mean, I like his chances.
And also, I pointed this out to a lot of folks after the election results came in. He did a great job here on Ruthless. Dude, had a great interview. I think that's what put him over the top.
One of the best interview feedbacks we've got other than Progrum.
Yeah.
Like this guy, because remember he brought that moonshine in here?
Yeah, good stuff.
And I don't even know what that was, but it had a funny name, and man, it had
We're
a
simple
kick.
people. We like some good booze.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. He got the joke immediately. And it was a great guy.
Great guy.
And fun to interact with. Obviously, you put him in a room of 50 people, you're going to win him over pretty quickly because he's incredibly charismatic. So we look forward to that race. But if you recall the beginning of this cycle, the way it mapped out, it's heavily advantageous towards Republicans in a way that it really hasn't been in this good in my entire career in Washington, because Democrats, you typically look at these things are where are the pickup opportunities? Where are the places you can change the makeup of a Senate? Obviously, you want to hold as many incumbents as you can, but like where are the pickup opportunities? This year?
To back up. So like the way to look at Senate races, because it's every 6 years, is
this is good.
Here's the thing.
This is good.
No, this is good information.
Smug's explaining the Senate.
You essentially have one team that's on the offense and one team that's on the defense, whether that's Republicans or Democrats. It's basically who has more of their incumbents on the line, right?
True.
Especially in states that can swing. Like you've got Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Ohio is a red state. There's no reason for him to be the senator. So the fact that he's up on the ballot, that he's in cycle, they're on defense there. So that's the opportunity for a pickup. That's the kind of opportunities that Republicans have tons of coast to coast.
And that's absolutely right. And I think it also stresses the importance of doing our best in a cycle that gives us our best opportunity, because next cycle it's going to be much more difficult.
Yep.
So like
Republicans are on offense. In this cycle.
You could figure out a quick way to a majority by winning West Virginia and winning Montana, but like Ohio, we need Ohio. Mm-hmm. We want to get Pennsvillia.
Because remember, it's 6-year terms,
right? And then like getting to play offense in a place like Maryland. I mean, I saw a poll today. Larry Hogan up big on.
That's a generational change, and look.
And it builds you a cushion. My point is it builds you a cushion for the next cycle in which it's not as advantageous. And so, like, you have to make the most of every opportunity. And I hope the listeners understand that. It's like, it's not just getting to 51. It's get as much as you can.
That's right.
You gotta harvest as much as you can when the getting's good.
Yeah, and also just not getting pulled in to try to spread yourself too thin. I mean, I think the way that the professionals looked at this cycle is, West Virginia, first amongst them, Joe Manchin, now retiring. The only reason he's retiring, by the way, is because the governor, Jim Justice, filed for Senate and was blowing him out for 6 months.
His approval's through the roof.
Rather than lose, I'm going to walk away. And that worked, right? So he's walked away there. That looks like a Republican pickup. Ohio, which obviously, I mean, Trump had a 7-8 point margin in 2020. Nothing's changed there from how the polls look in terms of his advantage. If you get a candidate that can skew close enough, within 7, for crying out loud, you're going to get a pickup there. And then Montana, a state that's very Republican, although it's been interesting over the years, they've elected Democrats.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, there's a kind of a different set of politics there. It's very candidate driven, which is why Republicans were whole hog into trying to get this guy Tim Sheehy, who's now the Republican candidate, to run, because he fits the demographics of that state. He's young,
Navy SEAL.
Navy SEAL. He's a handsome man, but he's smart, and that is something that John Tester has not gone up against.
Well, and it's also just the perfect contrast to Tester, because if you see any of John Tester's ads here between now and Election Day, he's going to be the guy holding up the fact that he's lost fingers and stuff, and he's got that buzz cut, and his public persona is very different than his voting record.
That's the thing.
Yep.
Right? And so he tries to sell himself as a cultural fit for the state.
Yeah.
Record be damned.
Yep.
That ain't going to fly when you're running against Tim Sheehy.
Nope.
You know?
It's just not.
He's been there too long. Things have gotten worse. He's allowed them to pass all this stuff that we hate here in Montana.
You're just not going to aw shucks it.
No,
at all.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work this time around. So anyway, those are the kind of the core states. Democrats, honestly, their best pickup opportunities are hilarious. Ted Cruz in Texas.
They're really banking on
right?
that.
Rick Scott in Florida and Holly in Missouri. Like that's their best shot. These are all Republican at a minimum plus 6 or 7. Florida is going to be a little tighter than that, but it's decisively put into a Republican category in recent years. Like they got a rough map. And then you start adding the industrial Midwest to it. They have incumbents in Pennsylvania. We mentioned Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. These are all Democrat-held seats, right? They have McCormick, who you've heard a few times on this show, great candidate in Pennsylvania. If that presidential election is even close, I think he gets home against Bob Casey. Look at Michigan, which is an open seat with the retirement of Debbie Stabenow. Rogers, who you heard on this show, seems to be consolidating support there. He got a Trump endorsement a couple of weeks ago. He's going to be a real tough out in Michigan in a way that we haven't seen. Like there have been good candidates there, like John James, that have, it's been difficult over the years to win Michigan, but this seems like the right opportunity, particularly at a time when Biden is sucking wind.
In the 30s.
Yeah, I mean, suck and win. So that looks like opportunity. And then you have Tammy Baldwin, the first openly gay senator in the Senate, who has had the good fortune of running in consecutive cycles with one with Obama on the top of the ticket and one in a Democratic wave year. Right? And her competition has not been terrific. This is the first opportunity with the mustache man, Eric Hovde.
Yeah.
Where she's going to get a real battle. And I think Trump wins Wisconsin, if I'm looking at it right now. If that happens, I mean, look, you got a lot of states there that all of a sudden, to your point, you're piling on top of what a potential majority would be. And it could be a generational thing. Because 6-year terms, they don't flip-flop back and forth.
No, you're building in a durability for a majority for a while. And that's the most important thing. If you want to change the country and take it on a center-right path, you need that. It can't just be, we won this one, we lost the next one. That's not how it works.
Get the padding in place that we can have a Senate majority for Republicans through the entire Trump presidency.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, you look out west, and there are 2 states that have bedeviled Republicans in recent years with Nevada and Arizona. But Nevada in particular, you look at, I can't find a poll dating back 90 days that doesn't show Donald Trump winning with a margin, like outside the margin.
Yeah.
Which is a very different thing, right? I mean, Biden carried it, Hillary Clinton carried it, Obama carried it twice. If Donald Trump carries by 4 or 5 points, as polls suggest, Sam Brown could be a United States Senator in Nevada. Okay, let's look. I mean, Arizona is tricky because what Republicans, we've talked about it a lot. We've lamented the fact that there is a huge separation between party apparatus and a primary electorate from the general electorate, which is a center-right state.
Mm-hmm.
But too often in recent years, the party apparatus and a primary electorate have worked in concert to make only a Republican you could lose these big, high-pressure state elections. It remains to be seen how this works out. Kristen Sinema, the sitting senator, has been run out of town, as you mentioned.
In Arizona.
She was a moderate.
Yeah.
So Ruben Gallego, who's amongst the most left-wing people in all of Congress, is running. And I don't think that's going to be a secret to anybody. And we've got Carrie Lake on the Republican side, who's a very gifted communicator. Democrats are obviously banking on the fact that they can try to define her in the same way she was defined in that governor's race and the post-2020 environment and all that stuff. We'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. It's a late primary there, although there's no doubt about who the candidates are going to be. That is going to have to take a little bit of time to mature to see how that thing shakes out. But all of that and everything that we just ran through, that's a lot of great opportunities. Not to mention like Jim Banks in Indiana is going to hold that seat. Great candidate, great guy. I mean, this is looking pretty good at this stage.
The map's looking great. It's all about execution now at this point.
It is. And to the point of execution, we talked about Arizona and Nevada. And the thing I'm hoping to see from President Trump and the RNC and all of these folks is to bring back what used to be the bread and butter of the Republican Party, and that is early vote and absentee by mail.
Yep.
We have to get back to that culture, especially in the places like Nevada and Arizona, where we're so reliant in banking those votes in order to be able to win in an environment like this. Even if the polls look great, you gotta do it. Here at Ruthless, we love this country and its amazing history. Defending our values today means remembering where we came from. There's no better way to connect with history than to hold a piece of it in your hand. For over 20 years, our great sponsor, CSN Mint, has offered a wide variety of certified U.S. Mint collectible coins and precious metals. For example, right now they're offering a Morgan silver dollar that was struck in 1878, a 140-year-old piece of American history that you can have as your own. Coins hold both an intrinsic and historic collectible value, while stacking silver in the form of bars or rounds holds an intrinsic value of the metal. Coins, particularly certified coins, hold additional value as historic collectibles. So explore CSN Mint's extensive catalog of bullion bars, coins, and historic collectibles. Whether you're a seasoned investor or a passionate collector, you'll find a diverse range of products to suit your needs and preferences. At CSN Mint, trust is paramount. Every product you purchase includes the original certificate of authenticity, or is certified and graded by a third-party grader to ensure origin and purity. With CSN Mint, you can build your collection with confidence. Experience world-class customer service and support with CSN Mint. Their team of knowledgeable professionals is available to assist you every step of the way, from product selection to order fulfillment and beyond. Own a piece of our great American history. Go to csnmint.com/ruthless and use promo code RUTHLESS at checkout to get a free Silver American Eagle over $30 in value with your purchase of $75 or more.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, you make this point often, Duncan, that, when we worked in Nevada, there was a heavy influence within the Republican primary electorate to vote only on Election Day. That's the only way it would count. And there was a snowstorm on Election Day.
Yeah.
And a huge number of people couldn't get to the polls.
Yeah.
I mean, in a race that was ultimately decided by less than 8,000 votes. So you can see where this being a part of the legalized infrastructure, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, if you don't have time to change the rules, you better get a part of it so you don't lose, right? But it all looks pretty good, and that's just a quick run through. We haven't done it in a while.
Yeah.
Great update.
And we'll have, we'll get Danes back on. We'll probably get Stephen Law on. You can hear some of that. We'll get Constant on from the House, talk through this stuff. You're going to get a lot more of it as we get closer.
Yeah. And that's what I love about our show is like a guy like a Dan Constant or a Stephen Law.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to see them on primetime
No,
cable
it's the only
news,
place you're going to see them.
You know?
Yeah.
But like these guys are some of the best repository of information on how Republicans are going to win elections this fall. And like having them on, those episodes are always so good. They're so full of information. I just love being able to do that for the listeners.
It's so great. That's awesome. All right, do you guys want some PNAS news?
Of course.
So Cactus Communications, it's a leading science communications and technology company. And this is according to PR Newswire. So
Highly respected.
A highly respected press release company. A leading they're partnering with PNAS.
Yeah.
The big PNAS partnership.
That's the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
That's exactly right. Thank you for your specificity. They're leading a multidisciplinary research journal. In addition to just all of that. This will make PNAS's high-quality research accessible to researchers through Discovery, the highest-rated literature search and reading platform. That's by Cactus. So I think the upshot here is, and I know how much McDaniel loves the PNAS, is that you'll be able to get all of your PNAS immediately at the tip of your fingers.
With Cactus. Doesn't sound fun.
Because of Cactus Communications, which is, I mean, look, there's a lot of good stuff here. I could go into it if you're into the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences.
Which, honestly, if I can be brutally honest, I don't care about science. I hate science. I hate experts.
But you love PNAS.
They should honestly get rid of this organization. I'm done with them.
You don't like PNAS?
I hate the experts. I'm done with the science. I don't trust the science.
Yeah.
What I would love, and I'm glad that the PNAS is getting a wider distribution here.
Yeah, it's important.
It's important. I would love if the minions could peer review some studies from PNAS.
Yeah, I mean, they have a real hot and cold relationship with PNAS typically.
Yeah.
But again, I think their input is always warranted.
Of course.
No question about it.
It's an important update.
We gave you no news on that. There's an electric aircraft CEO. I didn't know they had those. Did you know they had those?
I know it's been like attempted. I have yet to see like a working model of this.
I don't really know how this works, but can we play clip 3 to see what this thing? Okay. Oh, what do we got? Oh boy, it looks like a drone.
It's essentially a giant drone,
right?
And that's the thing is like that's the idea. Like I remember years and years ago, Uber itself had a plan in New York City of like, you know, setting up rooftops all around the city where instead of taking a cab, getting stuck in traffic for 40 minutes, it'd be like, okay, you can fly in one of these giant drones.
Yeah.
And get anywhere in town.
And they just take you everywhere. So it operates like an Uber. So this guy, Joe Ben Bevert, I think that's right. Feels right. Hopes to make his company's electric air taxis as cheap as hailing a rideshare, he told Axios' Joanne Mueller at the annual What's Next Summit in D.C. on Tuesday. Bevert, the founder and CEO of electric air taxi developer Joby Aviation, Inc., said he wants to make the electric taxis accessible to everyone.
Okay, I got to stop you right there.
You're not for this.
No, I think they need to hire better PR people because I don't think you need to be overstressing how cheap it's going to be when you be putting some person in the air in your device.
What a great point.
It's just I understand price competition to be an important part of your business model, but stressing it this much feels dangerous.
It feels like maybe there should be a safety element.
No, it feels like gas station sushi. You know? It's like you don't want to stress how cheap it is because then it feels dangerous. It feels like I'm going to get a parasite if I eat this sushi, and it feels like I'm going to crash if I get inside this airplane.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good point.
Thank you.
I hadn't thought about that. And I'm unclear as to how it didn't look like there was a pilot. So these guys like joysticking these things?
I don't know.
You like to have somebody in the vehicle that has some skin in the game.
Yeah,
Don't you?
Right.
Tell you?
Yes.
If he's just like sitting at home with the Xbox controller flying it, and he's like, you know, it's been a long day. The hell with these people.
Like, he's like, the phone rings.
Yeah. My DoorDash is here.
So this guy envisions a world where you get off a Delta flight and into Joby Air taxis as seamlessly as possible. We're building a vertiport infrastructure at JFK, LaGuardia, LAX to give really fantastic customer experience of a tight integration between your Delta flight and your Joby flight. Okay, well, I mean, look, I'm going to let some other people do it.
I'm going to let a lot of people try this. Some may die.
And you
some
can
may
tell
not.
us.
And if it works, maybe I'll give it a shot.
You can tell us how it works. All right. So graphic 2, you got to put this thing up. According to the New York Post, a mysterious Godzilla egg spotted in a lake. What in the alien invasion is this? I don't even know what I'm looking at here. It looks like a sack full of basketballs.
Yeah, it's like numerous pods, sort of almost like a giant pearl necklace of eggs.
That is 1,000. That's 1,000. That's 1,000% Godzilla egg.
I knew you'd like that.
For the folks on YouTube who are seeing this, that's 1,000% Godzilla egg. So like the highly respected New York Post, it's not like we are claiming this is Godzilla egg. This is the New York Post, in quotes, saying mysterious, quote, Godzilla eggs.
Smug, would you go as far as to say it's a pearl necklace of Godzilla eggs?
I mean, I would say it's Godzilla eggs.
Yeah, that's
it is
what
absolutely
you're
Godzilla
eggs. You're going to land on that. I think that's smart. And it looks like it's wrapped in some kind of an alligator skin.
So this is not like a normal thing. Like this is not like, oh, maybe some alligators. This is just an alligator nest of their eggs.
I don't think that's the way they do it.
Normal. At all. No.
So the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife and Conservation highlighted these bizarro objects, which were found in the McGee Creek Reservoir in a Facebook post going viral. Accompanying photos show a hard-shelled gelatinous orb dangling from an underwater tree like a macabre Christmas decoration or the spawn of some giant extraterrestrial toad.
See, this is when I walk away. The problem here is I hope everybody has seen Alien.
Yep. Yeah.
And you don't just hover your face over the pod.
No.
Because then the pod opens up.
The facehugger hits you.
The facehugger hits you.
Yeah.
Boom, you're done. You're going to get a chest burster, and it's over.
It's a wrap. I mean, everyone knows this.
It's a wrap. This is just, it's science.
When do we
stop
playing along with this?
And now it's like, oh, wow, I better get the egg out of the water that looks like Godzilla. Nope. I mean, no, I'm not getting close to this thing.
No. And honestly, I'm sure there's fine folks at the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. Why did you not pull out your sidearm and shoot every one of these eggs? That should be like mission number 1. I don't know what creature this is. Why is your first thing?
Set it on fire.
Hey guys, let's all take pictures with it and post on Facebook. If you don't know what the animal
set
is,
it on fire.
Open fire. Or set it on fire.
Well, fire's key because we also learned from Alien is that like their blood is acid.
Yeah, they don't want that.
Yeah, you don't want that.
If
you don't want to cut
them.
it. You got to heat it up. You just got to go ahead and light it on fire.
Yeah, I think that's right. So I'm left wanting a bit by this article.
Okay.
Because as it turns out, what they say is, as it turns out, these slimy spheres are actually native aquatic microorganisms known as bryozoans.
Fake news.
Right?
That's what they want you to think.
Colloquially called moss animals, and these microscopic filter feeders form colonies by building a coral-like exoskeleton, which are found attached to submerged rocks, branches, or other structures. Don't be alarmed by their Martian-like countenance. These critters are of no danger to you or your wildlife. Okay.
Oh, yeah. BS.
Why haven't we seen them before?
Bingo.
For starters. And second, okay, do you mind explaining to me what the bryozoan thing is?
It's a bryozoan. This is of no concern.
Oh, no, don't worry. It's a bryozoan.
I remember.
Like, oh, that's great.
I remember a tweet from the
clearly.
WHO in like January of 2020 being like, there's this thing called COVID. It's not going to be able to spread human to human. Yeah, right, bro. Yet again, I don't trust the experts. I trust fire. I think y'all make a great point. Light that shit on fire.
Yeah.
I'm not going to believe anything these people say. No one has seen anything like that. It's not normal. Set it on fire. Like, that's a rule of thumb. Doesn't look normal? Fire.
Yeah.
Simple man.
It really doesn't. We've got to play a game here, folks. And it's Thursday. Mm-hmm. So as we do, it's King of the Hill, the featured game. Have we done 100? Have we done 100 of these things yet?
I think T-Rex said we're closing in on 100.
I think we're going. This might be,
or we have cracked it, but King of the Hill has become quite the tradition.
It really has. It really has. And for this particular game, what you have done is nominated me to jump my round as bailiff and become judge, jury, and executioner. I'll have you know that I appreciate the nomination. I'll accept it, but I will not relinquish next week's.
Seems fair to me.
So I will do it. twice, and
Seems fair to me.
that's just something that I'm going to institute as judge. So
you're really seizing power over there.
That's exactly what I'm doing. It's a land grab.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's something we're going to have to do because our pal here, John Ashbrook, has decided to vacate the program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
What do you think
some
about
people
that?
just don't care. Like it's kind of like, Michael Jordan said he never takes a day off. He never takes a game off. And that's why he's a champion. And so there's always a line in the sand that separates like a champion from a hanger-on. Like no one talks about like, B.J. Armstrong was amazing. No, they talk about Michael Jordan was amazing.
Well, if you played NBA Live 95, B.J. Armstrong was amazing.
He was.
Just
knocked down the three.
But which is to say that,
baseline
like,
three, he could not miss an NBA Live 95. But for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, we had John Ashbrook at the beginning of the program, and then he had to duck out, unfortunately, for work. And so now... So now... We're not going to have a ringside announcer.
Bro grabs golf bags and he's like, I got a call.
Let's try to patch that.
You think we can patch it in post?
I think we can figure out how to patch that in.
Yeah, fix it in post.
All right. So you're the defending champion.
No.
I'm the defending champion.
You're the defending champion.
With Joe Walsh.
With Joe Walsh.
Rough start to your judgeship.
You know what? I want
I think
zero
he's doing
lip.
a great job.
I want zero lip. And if I get any more lip, I'm going to start taking egregious action here. Okay? So what kind of asshole are you bringing?
I'm bringing in as the challenger, Bill Crystal.
Oh, boy.
wow.
Okay. All right. Well, I know he's got hot content lately. So with that, let's hope we can get Smash to go ringside.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. It's time for King of the Hill. In the red corner, fighting out of Pierre Omadier's checkbook. Bill War Now, War Forever, Crystal. And now, in the blue corner, fighting from who knows where, Smoking Joe Walsh.
Okay, fellas. Champion presents first. So, Smug, what do we got?
Ready to go. I'm bringing all nukes this week. Defending champion Joe Walsh. Spaghetti, could I get exhibit number 7 on the screen, please? So this is a tweet from Joe Walsh. It says, regarding the bloodbath comment, Trump deserves zero benefit of the doubt. He spewed and cited so much hatred, cruelty, lying, ignorance, fear, and violence the past 8 to 9 years. It doesn't matter if this time he was just talking about cars. He deserves zero benefit of the doubt. Like, this is the game plan. Completely, like, he gave away the game. It doesn't matter if we're lying. Let's just say it anyways. And that's like the heart of the entire bloodbath. He's just too stupid to act like, every other Democrat is of like, oh, well, guys, this is actually very dangerous. He's like, listen, guys, we're all lying about this shit. It's incredible. He's too stupid to do his job well.
It is actually quite remarkable. It is actually quite remarkable. And right around the noon hour, too, so you can't really blame the martinis at that point. All right, what do we got, Duncan?
Kind of caught between a couple here.
I like the strategy.
Well, I don't know if I should play a tweet that is an egregious lie as well to keep it on theme or go a different direction.
Well, acting as both the judge and the bailiff, I will urge you to come to a consensus quickly, please.
Okay.
That's a dual threat.
Yeah, really something.
Sing and dance.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go with the thing that I think is just the funniest, and I think it lays bare.
Today plays, bro.
I think it lays bare the inherent lie to everything of never Trump, and that is exhibit number 8, please.
Okay. Let's have a look at.
He just says the quiet part loud here, which I really appreciate, and it's something that every never Trump person has said in 1,000 different ways, but never been this clear and obvious about. Bill Crystal. Even if you agree with all of Trump's, quote, policies, you surely have a moral and civic obligation to vote against him.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
That's pretty weak.
This is no, it's
That's
not
honestly,
weak.
it's weak.
This is the distillation of the entire argument they've been making since he came down the gold escalator, and it is the bankrupt thing. It is, don't vote for what you want. Don't vote for what your values are. Right? It's the entire thing we talked about on the previous show about this man has to be morally unfit even if you agree with everything he does and you liked all of his policies and all the success of his administration, you are morally obligated to vote against what you believe.
So here's what I love about both of your selections is that they're on genre.
Yeah.
They're both giving away the game.
And that's what I was struggling with.
They're both extremely like a window into the soul of the never Trump / progressive left.
Yeah.
And what I really like about Smugs is that it takes just a specific look inside of a current news cycle. But what he's doing is explaining what Bill Kristol just laid out, right? I mean, he's taking the current look at a news cycle and applying exactly what it is that Bill Kristol said. For that reason, he gets about 10,000 feet above the cloud line in a way that Smokin' Joe was right on it, and I was ready to give it to him if this wasn't an exact on genre. He lifted it above the clouds, and I'll give it the first round to Kristol.
Wow, what a ripoff. He just said that, like, I actually did the in practice, the practical and stuff, theoretical, and then this crooked judge steals it.
Are you complaining with this?
Yeah, it's a crooked judge. What are you going to do?
Well, this is going to get a lot harder on you, pal.
I just want to make a note that I appreciate that the bailiff forced me to make the hard decision, and I ended up making the right decision on the...
Well, I hope Judge Fannie Willis at least will listen to my second round after Duncan goes.
This is outrageous. I might not.
Well, I might not.
See?
Let's just end it. Let's end it right here. Nikki Spaghetti with exhibit number 13, please. Bill Kristol writes, if Joe Biden wants an immediate lift in the polls, I think he just needs to go on BBC and demand to know the whereabouts of Kate Middleton. If he did this today, St. Patrick's Day, he could add some old-fashioned Irish denunciation of the British monarchy, #thinking outside the box.
The hardest part with Kristol is he's so unfunny that
he tries so hard.
You don't know, like, absolutely where he's coming. Like, he has a combination of two things. He's super not funny. Mm-hmm. And then he also has the worst political advice in American history. And so in a tweet like that, it's tough to decipher whether this is a tongue-in-cheek operation or this is actually real advice.
So I have a theory on this, and that is he gets dunked on so hard for his genuine, serious opinions that he also mixes in stuff that is a goof, so that the ones that he's getting ratioed on seem like they might be a goof as well.
They might too be a goof.
And therein lies the sort of genius of his stupidity, if that makes sense.
I got it. All right, Smug, what do we got?
Is an excellent take that a fair judge would award the win to. Spaghetti, can we get exhibit number 3, please?
I don't need to see it.
Joe Walsh tweets, Greg Abbott sends a tweet saying that one of the illegal aliens that was caught at the border was from Lebanon and admitted he's a Hezbollah terrorist hoping to make a bomb. Straight up just said that.
Okay.
So Joe Walsh's take on this is, but he was caught. So good thing, right, Gov? And by the way, if the border was open, how was he caught?
Holy shit! I as much as
Does
I want
anything else need
as
to be
much
said?
as I want to rule against you, and I do with every fabric of my being. I'd love to make you go home after 2. There's no way I can ignore
Undeniable.
That is a fucking nuclear bomb. Joe Walsh wins round 2.
Okay.
I'm ready to go immediately. I'm not like Duncan where I got to sing and dance and take up everyone's time.
Unlike Smug, I'm not going to attack the judge / bailiff.
Well, and that goes a long way with the judge and the bailiff.
Can I get exhibit 6, please? So the New York Post says that Joe Biden has been given basically
this is the
new
thing.
super orthopedic senior citizen shoes, so he won't fall over and croak. Joe Walsh's take is, my 87-year-old mother-in-law just got new custom balance shoes to stabilize her walking. For seniors falling can be really bad. So I don't need to read this piece because I assume the point they're making is that these shoes for Biden are a really good thing, right?
It just drifted right past the main thing. Like just sailed the boat right past the
At any
harbor.
moment, our president could just fall and croak.
Like
my 87-year-old mother-in-law, and that's totally normal.
Like the issue was all of us concerned about the stability of his feet, not the fact that they were unstable in the first place. That's a hell of a take. Okay. All right, what do we got?
Spaghetti, let's get to exhibit number 9. So there's an aggregator account on Twitter that posts what Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social because he doesn't post on Twitter anymore, right?
Yeah.
So this is one of those aggregator accounts that posts a tweet from Donald Trump about our country going down the drain. Bill Kristol quote tweets it and says, in all caps, "What the hell do we have to lose? Our freedoms, our liberal democracy, our sense of decency, and our national self-respect."
Oof, that's
and this
silly.
is a guy who says he's going to vote for Joe Biden, who has witnessed what has happened to our country, our sense of decency, our national self-respect since Joe Biden has been president of the United States. We think we got a lot of that. That's going on.
This is the rare occasion where we're going to need the judicial arm to help provide context for the audience. And so at this time, I'll instruct the bailiff to read the initial tweet, which I will happily do as bailiff.
Yes.
This is highly
our
illegal.
Once
This is a
great
activist
country
judge run amok.
is going down the drain. We are a nation in decline. Vote for Trump. What the hell do you have to lose? Donald Trump, Truth Social, and that was his post.
Yeah.
What the hell do we have to lose? And he goes all caps on it, and then he says our freedoms, our liberal democracy, our sense of decency, and our national self-respect, because our national self-respect and all of that has been going swimmingly.
Yeah, high marks.
Can I take one more look at the Exhibit 6, please, of Joe Walsh? I mean, the fact that this guy dances right by this, the fact that he just, it's like, the fact that he's 80 whatever is not the problem. It's that the shoes are somehow in a conversation by themselves outside of his frailty and outside of his ability to do the job is an incredible
take.
Incredible take. I will not look past it. I wanted to make you lose with every fiber of my being. I hate you, and I
Winners win.
And I hate the disrespect.
Winners win.
But I will say that Joe Walsh.
Three-peat like Jordan.
Even in defeat, I have to admit,
I can't be stopped. I'm just too
it's
good.
It's a fantastic take.
It's a burden to bear.
And what I think was the wildest thing about Joe Walsh's take is I think earnestly in his heart he thought he was helping Joe Biden
really
with this tweet, and he's like, my 87-year, you know what I mean? Like,
no, it makes it worse.
It makes it so much
He's
worse.
like, this is relatable. Everyone, you know your 87-year-old mother-in-law? She's just like Joe.
What a
They're
practitioner.
both just old as hell.
What a political practitioner. What unbelievable. I love that. Great game, fellas. Champion Smug, you retain the title. We'll move on.
The media is great at distracting you from things you should actually be focused on. While the media was debating Taylor Swift, China, Russia, Brazil, India, and South Africa, basically half the world's population created BRICS. That's BRICS, which is a massive economic alliance that's already talking about replacing the dollar with their own currency. The consequences of this could be dire, with your 401k accounts losing value if BRICS is successful. Why risk your personal savings? Diversify your financial future. Invest in the one thing that has proven stable for centuries, gold, from today's sponsor, Allegiance Gold. They've earned the highest trust ratings in the precious metals industry, and their relationships are based on integrity, expertise, and impeccable service. Go to protectwithruthless.com today or call 855-510-GOLD. Right now, get up to $5,000 in free silver with a qualifying purchase. Don't rely on promises of ever-increasing stock values or assurances the economy will remain stable forever. Protect your financial future today. ProtectWithRuthless.com. That's ProtectWithRuthless.com, or call 855-510-GOLD.
So with that, we got to go to our great guest. And I cannot emphasize enough how much I appreciate him coming on the program, because he means a great deal to me personally. And I know a lot of us on the program grew up with him narrating the news for our lives. And some of the reasons why we're interested and started doing this line of work were because of Brit Hume. Let's go to him. I want to welcome to the program an old friend of ours, one of the absolute gentlemen of the news business. And we were talking before the show, sort of narrated an awful lot of our early professional lives here at the Ruthless Variety program. Fox News' Brit Hume. Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be asked.
Listen, no, I really mean it. You are a newsman's newsman. And for an awful lot of us who got started in either the late 90s, early 2000s, when you were anchoring there on Fox, it was like the one thing you didn't miss. You had to go get Brit's show. You had to go hear the news right from the source.
Well, thanks for that. I'm glad to know you're out there.
Yeah. It just didn't get better. I mean, when you showed up on TV and then you turned it over to Mort Kondracki and Fred Barnes, I mean, it really was the best news television. Can't miss.
But I think that's a good way of trying to kind of getting into. I want your perspective on where we've gone and what you've seen here in the news business, because like this week we're dealing with the bloodbath thing from President Trump's comments at an Ohio rally that were taken just completely out of context and sort of reprinted as that they're meaning something entirely different than what it was that he said in context. And we're obviously not in a very good spot in news journalism, don't you think?
Oh, I agree entirely. You know, that I think that what's happened is that journalists realized at some point that they had power or could have power. And power to influence events was always sort of a byproduct of the work you did. In other words, if you broke important stories and politicians or others reacted to them and they had an impact, that was fine. But if you got into the business for the purpose of influencing politics, that was not so fine. And I think we are absolutely populated now in the news media with people who are in it for that reason, to try to influence events. So along comes, to cite the most conspicuous recent example, Donald Trump, somebody who, if we all sat down and tried to design somebody that news people in today's world would hate, we couldn't do better than Donald Trump. You know, rich and gaudy and conspicuous and full of braggadocio and, you know, careless with the truth. You know, they hated him and considered his presence in our politics to constitute a national emergency.
Right.
For which all the old rules about being fair and careful and so on had to go out the window, because the mission was to drive Donald Trump out of public life. And it continues to this day. And, you know, this episode involving the word bloodbath over the weekend is only the most recent example.
So what I'm trying to get at here is whether Donald Trump is the cause of the news media to break itself apart in the traditional sense that you sort of got started and made your career in, or whether he was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. And in other words, all of this was sort of happening just under the surface, and he was sort of the public figure that exposed it.
I think the latter that you cite there, Josh, is right. That he pushed the buttons to trigger this avalanche of coverage, which has been so embarrassingly bad. I mean, the Trump-Russia collusion fiasco is probably the biggest example, but there are countless others, and and Trump brought it all out because he was so well designed to be hated by nearly everybody in the media, and people lost their minds over it. Mm-hmm. And otherwise sensible people, lawyers, analysts, political figures, and so on, would say and do the most extravagant things in the case of Trump. And it's really has distorted our political life now for, going on, 8 or 9 years.
Now, one of the things that we love to do is look at old clips of old news journalists, and you obviously got your broadcasting career alongside Peter Jennings at ABC. But getting to take and looking at the way that they processed news in their era, no less significant, no less capable of hyperbole, but they just sort of dealt with it and had kind of a reasonable, sort of emotion-neutral reporting of the news. Do you have any sort of line of demarcation where you felt like that just sort of started to slip? Because it's just in such a different place now. It's almost unrecognizable.
Well, I think what happened, Josh, is that, journalists have tended, being who they are, to be liberals. Mm-hmm. As long as I've been in the business, and that goes back, I went to work for a newspaper out of college in 1965. So I've been doing this a while, and there's always been a tendency to favor liberal causes and liberal political figures and so on. But any editorializing or slanted coverage was simply not tolerated in those days.
Yeah.
When I was working for a medium-sized metropolitan daily newspaper in Hartford, Connecticut, it's defunct now, but in those days, if you tried to slip any editorializing or slanted copy into your stories, you couldn't get it past the desk. I mean, they know it was intolerable. And if you had the reputation for doing that, you were in serious trouble. Mm-hmm. So you didn't do it. Nobody did. The objective was to be neutral in terms of what we thought. So we knew we weren't supposed to do that, and we didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And even when I was at ABC News, there were times we would have arguments. And I mean, Peter Jennings was very pro-Palestinian, for example, and he was also considered himself an authority on the Middle East with some reason because he covered it forever. And I remember during the first Gulf War, he was very dubious about the prospects for success, and we would contend over the proper way to phrase things and so on. But we never went beyond the bounds of general neutrality. Mm-hmm. And today, journalists simply don't do that. That's been the drift, and I think a part of it has to do with the business model. Mm-hmm. The business model for the longest time, both in print and in broadcasting, was to gather the biggest possible audience to present to an advertiser. Nowadays, advertising revenue is much less important than it was, particularly in TV, but also in print. And what you have now is niche audiences, which in a country this size can be quite large indeed. And so what you end up doing, partly for business reasons, partly for reasons of wanting to exercise power, is journalists are trying to appeal to a certain niche. And as I know, niches can be big enough so you can make quite a lot of money. The New York Times is doing it probably most successfully. Great big national circulation, and it's subscriber money, and that is the big item. And in broadcasting now, it's the fees that the cable companies mm-hmm. and other providers pay to Fox News and countless other outlets for the privilege of carrying their signal. They're carrying their broadcasts, and that's much more important now than advertising was. And the advertising model actually was good for journalism because it promoted neutrality so that the largest possible audience could find your product acceptable.
So based on those business trends you just laid out, it doesn't seem like there's much hope that we can get the old news back that we once knew and loved so much, where people just tuned in to get information, like they open up the back page of the newspaper to get weather. They just want information they can rely on. So what you're saying is that the prospect of a return to that is mighty bleak.
Well, I think it's, I don't think it's hopeless, but I think right now I don't see that that's the direction things are going in. But I think there's a place for straight news coverage. We try at Fox, Special Report being the best example, the 6 o'clock show, but throughout much of our day programming as well, we try to have neutral news coverage. And that doesn't mean we're not going to pursue stories we think are of interest to a conservative audience. Our coverage of the border, for example, which much of the press ignored for several years, has been a good example of that. That's a legitimate news story. We were always on the lookout for legitimate stories that other news media were not covering. And there were plenty to be had, given the bias in most of the coverage. But that doesn't mean that the coverage wasn't by our correspondents and anchors wasn't pretty straight. Now, in the evening, we have these opinion hosts. So we have opinion hosts on the 5 o'clock show and so on. But, throughout our day parts and through special report, the news coverage is pretty straight, and there's a market for it, as the success of those programs has illustrated.
What do you think about how the internet has also impacted what you were saying in the business model? Because you were saying, back in your days, being a print journalist, you couldn't get slanted copy across the desk. It seems like now that editors at some of these publications pursue that, and the journalists pursue that because of the click economy. And it's like, if you write that slanted copy and it gets a lot of attention on Twitter or Facebook, well, then the odds are pretty good you're going to end up on MSNBC that night in prime time, and it feeds this vicious cycle. So, is there any hope to ever break that? Because I don't think the internet's going away anytime soon.
I don't think so, and I don't think, despite early predictions of its demise, Twitter, now known as X, is going anywhere either. It seems to be thriving, and people want to be on there. Some of them, effectively, no matter where you work, in your regular job, want to kind of hang out a shingle on the internet or on Twitter and gather followers, and thereby hope to have influence. And so that, I think it does feed into the trend that you describe, and it may not be altogether healthy. I mean, I think, there needs to be some restraint exercise, and restraint is not where we are today.
Oh, certainly not. I do think it's interesting. You mentioned the business models and the creating of these niche audiences. What I find so fascinating is sort of what Roger Ailes saw at the advent of Fox was an audience that wasn't catered to at all by giving not even just a conservative perspective, but any perspective that wasn't significantly left of center. And it was intentional, and it was in pursuit of that audience. And where I look at the New York Times or the Washington Post as a good recent example, it almost seems as though they just think they're doing news the whole time, and yet they've cultivated an exclusively left audience, and so they're sort of stuck, right? The intentionality of what Ailes was looking for at the creation of Fox News is in direct contrast to where I think a lot of these publications find themselves today. Well, they're just kind of stuck servicing an audience that was self-selecting.
I think that's exactly right. And, Roger's concept was we would have news that was pretty straight, although we were on the lookout for stories that would interest an audience not being served. The border, as I mentioned, being a great example, but there are many, many others. And, we refused, for example, when the Trump-Russia story was all the rage and everybody was writing stories about it and bought into it and swallowed a lot of stuff wholesale they should have been skeptical about. We stayed away from, we covered it for sure. Covered the developments in it, but we didn't have any people on the air saying that, yeah, for sure Trump was in the pocket of Vladimir Putin, right, and so on. And there was a belief in the media, Josh, that that when the special counsel's report came out, that Trump would be found to have been in Putin's pocket, and a lot of us doubted that. A lot of us at Fox doubted that and were skeptical of it. And I felt and said many times that scandal had traveled farther on less evidence than any such story I've ever seen, and it did. Roger's view was conservative opinion in far larger quantity than you find in any mainstream outlet, and basically straightforward news coverage with a willingness to do stories that others are not doing that might appeal to a conservative audience, but were nonetheless legitimate.
Right.
And that's where we went with it, and it was a niche audience that amounted to something close to half the country, and the result is what you see in the ratings.
Yeah, it's got to be a wild ride, right? I mean, going basically from the beginning, both you and your wife, and watching the advent of this new sort of, a lot of people doubted whether there was a marketplace or not for Fox News, and then just the 25-year dominance in the marketplace that it has had. It's unmistakably the leader of cable news.
Yeah, that's right, Josh. And, it took a couple of years. I thought it would probably be 5 years before we, reached any kind of critical mass, just in terms of being on the air. Because when we started, we weren't even on in New York when we started.
Yeah.
We were on in Washington, but not in New York. And we were striving for clearances. And Rupert Murdoch, who is nothing if not bold, put up money to, the normal business model is the cable operators pay you for your product so they can carry it.
Right.
At the beginning, Rupert was paying them to carry it. So it was should have been an easy decision, but it took a while for us to get any kind of clearance. And I thought, well, maybe in 5 years we'll have enough clearance so we'll kind of be in a hunt. And maybe in 10 years we'll be fully competitive. Well, thanks to stories that we were able to cover in a way that was markedly different. I mean, the Florida recount being a good example, and there were and the aftermath of 9/11. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that was. I mean, what did we do wrong? Hand-wringing coverage about how we alienated the world and our foreign policy led to this and all that. We kind of didn't buy into that, and we covered it somewhat differently. Somebody once said to me, "Well, we're in the war there, the global war on terror." And somebody asked me whether our coverage had been supportive of that. I said, well, Fox News is not based in Switzerland.
Yeah, we all have teams here. Yeah.
But I don't think we were, thumping the tub for more war. On the other hand, we took it seriously and covered it not as some misadventure, particularly in the early going when we went into Afghanistan to try to root out the Taliban, which in fact we did. That's been given back now, but at the time that's what the United States was able to do. But so we thought that was the way to go, and I'll never forget the Florida recount. I mean, the media were all up in arms that George W. Bush was trying to steal the election. Well, there was an alternative way to look at that, and which was that Al Gore was trying to steal the election. And so we right away we thought, for example, that the courts in Florida were where the action was, and we put good reporters on those courthouses down there where the case was being played out, and covered it very, very energetically. And the audience responded, and it turned out to be the right way to cover the story. So we were lucky in the sense that we had opportunities early that were significantly large enough to attract an audience, and they did.
I don't want to dismiss what Fox did, because it is remarkable in the growth and finding stories that do cater to an audience that hasn't been spoken to by the rest of the media. But it seems sort of obvious.
Like nobody was doing it.
This is the thing. You would think all these other corporations are motivated by a profit motive, and half of the country is not ideologically inclined towards their position. Why is it that they violate the laws of economics every single day and don't try to pursue half of the country? It's bizarre.
It's a great question, actually.
Well, for the same reason that they've all bought into DEI. Yeah. Corporations deeply involved in that. There's no indication that it might help you reputationally in some quarters of the population, but there's no sign that it drives profits or demand for your product or any of the rest of it. Corporations, they're all reputationally concerned and worried, and liberal dogma permeates the thinking in these boardrooms to a great extent, much greater extent than I would have thought. And of course, if we all look at what's happening in the universities and the weakness of these university administrations in dealing with the abuses that DEI has caused and regularly continues to cause, you can get a sense that there's a mindset there that is something other than focused on education of students or making profits. They look at. I guess it was, what's the big hedge fund that has just begun to move away from all this investing for purposes of saving the planet and all the rest of it? It's dogma that they buy into, and it's a powerful force.
It really is.
It's where elite opinion is.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's unbelievable. I mean, honestly, there are good reporters at ABC, NBC, and CBS, but if you watch their evening newscast that's up against the Fox 6 o'clock, it's it's almost unwatchable. You know, the programs are indistinguishable from one another. Nobody is providing any kind of a different or like an alternative point of view on a story of the day.
And the story selection is all the same.
The story selection is the same. Everybody is doing the exact same thing. So they're all trying to just go along with what they think. I don't know if it's what they think the culture in New York wants, or what really drives that. The fights between New York and their Washington bureaus or what, but I really think Michael asked a great question. It's like, why don't they want something a little bit different or find somebody that's going to get a story that just has a different
I think it goes back to what you always say, Ashbrook, is like you got to think about news at a lot of these publications as not news for the public, but reporters and journalists
for each other
talking within their own social circle.
It's exactly.
I mean, that's
right.
the only explanation. That and the dogma, that Brit was talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and there's no doubt about it. I will say this: when I was at ABC News, I was there for 22 years. I would often be asked to do a story that came right out of what was on the front pages of the New York Times. This is particularly true when I was covering the White House for 8 years, and if I had a different way of looking at the story, I would argue that. And very often, the people I worked for were agreeable, reasonable people. And if I had if I made a point that said, I remember once they said, George H.W. Bush was president, they said, he's really not doing anything. He doesn't have a big domestic program. And I said, well, he's a Republican. and they all said, yeah, I guess you got a point. I said, look, he didn't make a lot of extravagant promises about what he was going to do as president that he needs now to follow up on with a great big expensive domestic program. He was more focused on foreign policy. He's a conservative. They don't believe that big government is the answer to everything. And they all said, well, let's do that story. Mm-hmm. And so I did. And it was fine. And they were fine with it. But I kind of started from scratch nearly every day. But I had a great run there. I loved working for those people. They were very good to me. I have no complaints about it. But there was a certain perspective that permeated sort of the attitudes around that World News Tonight rim where they all sat and worked together. But I found them to be reasonable people. But somebody's got to carry the banner.
Yeah.
Say, wait a minute, is there another perspective on this? And as long as the thinking is as uniform as it seems to be nowadays, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, I mean, you really, especially with a Democrat in the White House, another thing that we always say on the show is that if you want broadcast networks and the major newspapers to hold your government accountable, vote Republican. Because if a Democrat is there, all of a sudden, their curiosity just goes away.
It really does. And like going back to the top of the interview here with Donald Trump, I feel like the seeds of all of this was sort of planted during the Obama years. And I think a lot of the American...
The fawning.
The population woke up and is like, there's a lot of stuff that I know is not right, and I feel like nobody's talking about it. And you had also the rise of sort of independent news and the internet and conservative media during that same time. And I feel like that is what really, planted the seeds of Donald Trump's rise as sort of this alternative to the coverage that was seen.
Brit, how much is this is like you say, is cultural, like within a newsroom, within the news business? Because I felt like in the early 2000s when I got Brit Hume, it was the one guy that was talking to me like I wasn't a zoo animal, right? It was like, hey, they're conservatives and they walk amongst us.
Yeah. It's always been like conservatives were a peculiar species.
Yeah.
And journalists who were covering a conservative event were like visiting a foreign land, or as you suggest, like visiting a zoo and wondering with, genuine curiosity how these people could behave the way they do and think the way they do. And it was, it was strange because they didn't, because conservatives in the media have always been a minority, but today they're more conservative outlets out there, which is a healthy thing, I think. But, in the mainstream media, there just aren't any.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing you probably, and I don't know what your political leanings are other than what you talk about, but I'm guessing you spent the vast majority of your career not thinking of yourself as a conservative or right of center or anything. You were covering news. You had a perspective on what the news is. Even just the fact that we now needed to talk about different journalistic outlets as liberal or conservative. That must be an anathema for a guy who spent 22 years at ABC.
Well, it was because, we didn't want to be that way. Right. And we weren't allowed to be for a long time. But nowadays, the floodgates are open, and opinion is, you read these stories, even in as solid an outlet as the Wall Street Journal. When you look at the story selection in the Journal on the Israel-Gaza war, and it is almost all about the suffering of the people of Gaza. And it is forgotten in the coverage that it was, after all, the people in Gaza who put Hamas into power. And while many Gazans are clearly disillusioned with the governance that Hamas, which has never had another election, has brought them, the polling that there is on October 7th shows overwhelming support for the butchery that was carried out by Hamas on that day. Mm-hmm. So these supposedly innocent people maybe aren't as innocent as we're led to believe, and their suffering, to some extent, may be said to have been brought upon them. And after all, how is Israel, which has a right to defend itself, to go about rooting out Hamas, which was a widely supported objective at the beginning of this conflict, how it's supposed to carry that out and being nice about it?
Right.
And the efforts that Israel has made to minimize civilian casualties in an area, in a setting in which they're inevitable, is set aside in favor of so many Gazans are starving. The universal acceptance of the so-called Palestinian health authorities numbers, casualties, which do not distinguish between civilian and military casualties, and B are the product of a Hamas-controlled organization. That is to say, the Palestinian health authorities are Hamas-controlled because in Gaza, everything is.
You think Hamas maybe doesn't have our best interests at heart, Brit? They might not be a pinnacle of integrity?
These are people who not only carried out the stunning horrors of October 7th, but continued to hold all these Israeli hostages and some American hostages as well.
Right, yeah.
I think one of the things I'll get to quickly, because I got 3 quick questions for you and we got to get you out of here, is it seems like during Democratic administrations, there is something of a wag the dog mentality from major media outlets. The working relationship between a Democratic administration and the mainstream media is basically one and the same. Johnny always says that the best job in all of politics is a Democratic press secretary as a result of that, right? It's like the narrative is working together. And how much of that you think is like you mentioned, even the Journal with their news coverage of Gaza, and now you see an administration starting to move away from our only ally in the region after October 7th, which is mind-blowing in any other capacity except for the fact that it's on the front page of every newspaper.
It's there is a sense of being, when journalists are talking to the Democratic press secretary and so on, there's a commonality of thought between them that makes a friendly relationship easier to have. Now, I knew Republican press secretaries on Capitol Hill who were pretty skillful at talking to the media and dealing with them and having a kind of a comfortable relationship with them, but not many.
Right.
I remember vividly a moment, just to give you a sense of the attitudes that persist. This is stuck in my mind forever. My colleague, when I was covering the White House, was Susan Spencer at CBS News. Yeah. A person I knew very well and liked very much. We were out on the campaign trail with Bush in '92, and he went to a college a small Christian college out in the Midwest. And they never, a little college like that don't get presidential visits every day, and he was campaigning. So he comes into this room with all these fresh-faced kids sitting there, and they cheered him wildly. I remember she leaned over to me and she said, "Sig Heil."
Oh, Jesus. Oof.
Goodness.
That'll stick in your head.
Yeah, I never forgot that. And, Susan was a perfectly reasonable person. I liked her very much. We were good friends. But I remember thinking, oh, my God.
Yeah.
But such were the underlying attitudes. And they've been a long time. No doubt about that. And so you can imagine, with that kind of thinking, the general attitudes that were demonstrated. I remember anything Jesse Helms did was viewed kind of. Yep. You couldn't get coverage back then very well, but it's an act of the devil.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. All right, Britt, I got 3 questions for you that we do every guest who comes on for the first time. And as a listener, I think you probably know what's coming. But the first question is, if you can plan your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
Fettuccine Alfredo.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's great.
Very good.
Carbo loading. I love it.
Yeah. Are we going to do a little wine with that? Or are we like maybe a French bread?
Grey Goose.
Tall glass of vodka. I love it. And don't you dare drop a Cuba ice in it. I love it. All right. Second question. Looking back on your career, if you had total blue sky to do anything else in the world now that you've seen everything that you've seen, but you could do anything you wanted and there's no limitations, what do you think you would do with all that time?
Now or from the beginning?
Well, if you could just go do it again.
I'll do it all over again. I was out of college in 1965. I didn't have a job. I was married. We had a child on the way. I needed a job. I had no ambition that I could discern. I had no career. I majored in English, which turned out for my purposes to be a waste of time. And I was at sea. And I looked for a job that summer of 1965. And I tried as a teacher because I thought maybe I could teach English or something, and that didn't work. And I finally, through an employment agency, got a job on the afternoon paper in Hartford, Connecticut, the Hartford Times. I'll never forget standing in there the first day. I didn't have any sense that I ever wanted to be in journalism. I didn't work on the student paper or the radio station or any of that stuff in college. And this atmosphere, it was the newspaper, City Room of 1965 was about the same as it was in 1935. Clattering typewriters, guys sitting around the copy desk. Copy! Would yell across the room. There's a guy named Bill Shea. If his name hadn't been Bill Shea, we'd have had to change his name to Bill Shea because he was Bill Shea. With a little mouth and ruddy cheek, white hair, really colorful guy. And the spirit of sort of irreverence, things changing every day, and independence from the government, independence, period. I was absolutely enthralled with it. I thought, I love this. This is the coolest place I've ever been. I love it here. Oh. Now, you think of all the people we know and have known who spent the decade of their 20s trying to get their foot on the bottom rung of the right ladder. And here I, a completely lost soul, lucked out and got my foot on the bottom rung of the right ladder and the first job out of college. And I've always wanted to be a journalist, a reporter, really. It's all I've ever really been. It's all I ever really wanted to be.
It's very cool. Very, very cool. I love it. All right, last question. What motivates Brit Hume? And our view is it's the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat is what motivates most people. And it's not that anybody likes to lose or doesn't like to win. It's what motivates them to keep on going, keep on pushing.
Well, I like things that I would consider a victory. A call I make on something like, I felt vindicated when the report from Mueller came out on Trump-Russia collusion, a story I never bought from day one.
Yeah.
And I like that. But mostly I've been motivated all through my career by fear of failure.
There you go.
And it's an uncomfortable motivation, but it's effective. Roger Ailes used to say that he didn't mind too much people who were afraid of failing. And what he was afraid of was people who were afraid of succeeding. And so that's sort of what keeps me going. And now that I'm at this stage of my life and I'm doing analysis and commentary, I'm motivated to try to get it right.
Very cool. Well, you're one of a kind, Brit, and one of our absolute favorites, always will be, a first ballot Hall of Famer in the news business. Thank you so much for joining Ruthless today.
Well, God bless you guys, and thank you very much for having me on. It was an honor.
You got it. So, just like first-class guy.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Old school newsman. Like we could use a lot more.
We could use a lot more like that.
Brit Humes.
If we could just have, I don't know, maybe I'd even settle for just 2 or 3.
Remember journalism, guys?
Well,
what I love about him is they'll have him in for election night coverage and stuff like that, and he's just a guy who's always so measured in his response.
Yeah.
He's not giving you something out of left field. bombastic. He's giving you the news as he sees it and understands it.
Yeah,
and that used to be the thing that we expected from people in the news business.
It's the opposite of do it for clicks.
Yeah.
It's the honesty
and
the integrity behind it. And he just represents all of that. So all that being said, let's get looking forward to a big Friday of a hack madness that will envelop all of us for the next 3 weeks.
And fill out your brackets at hackmadness.org as you're listening to the Friday episode that'll be on the site. So after you hear the whole announcement on Friday, go to hackmadness.org, fill out your bracket so you can enter in the competition.
And for you journos hate listening, DMs are open.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have fun.
I think we did it, fellas.
I think so. Absolute banger of an episode, John. Thank you so much, Mr. Holmes. Thank you so much, Mr. Duncan. No thanks to Ashbrook, the quitter. But thank you so much to Brit Hume, a wonderful guest. And thank you to the Minions. Remember, subscribe on YouTube so you can see the video. So until next time, Minions, keep the faith, hold the line on the libs. We'll see you on Friday. Stay ruthless.